We sincerely hope that the Governor of Rajasthan will obey the law and only the law. He must remember that he has no other masters except the Constitution and the law. He must immediately grant the request of the Council of Ministers and summon a session of the Legislative Assembly of Rajasthan. Obviously, the President of India, the Rashtrapati, has the absolute authority to tell the Governor what you're doing is wrong and please call a session. Now, I can only hope that the Rashtrapati will intervene in the matter and instruct the Governor to call a session. It is with deep regret that I address you today, my friends of the media, and through you, the people of India, on an issue that has assumed dangerous and monstrous proportions. My acquaintance with the law obliges me to be both frank in my views and restrained in my language. Governors appointed by the BJP since 2014 have repeatedly violated the letter and spirit of the Constitution of India. In the process, they have gravely impaired parliamentary democracy, its conventions and traditions. I may remind you that there are at least 3 landmark judgments of the courts when the governors concerned acted in gross violation of the Constitution in Arunachal Pradesh in 2016, in Uttarakhand in 2016, and in Karnataka in 2019. Despite these judgments and the statements of law, the Governor of Rajasthan has stalled and continues to stall a perfectly valid request of the Council of Ministers of Rajasthan to convene a session of the Legislative Assembly. It is settled law that the Governor shall act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. The Governor has no discretion, let me repeat, no discretion at all in the matter. The questions that the Governor had raised to stall the request were irrelevant and beyond his authority. His current stand, that the law gives him a discretion to summon the assembly or not, is a complete distortion of the law declared by the courts. The fundamental basis of a parliamentary democracy is a functioning legislature. If the executive government wants the legislature to meet, it has the absolute right and authority to call a session. The governor is only a formal instrument, and I repeat, the governor is only a formal instrument to sign and issue the summons to the MLAs. If a chief minister who is accused of not enjoying a majority wants to prove his majority, he is entitled to call a session at the earliest to prove his majority. No one can stand in his way. Placing any obstacle to calling the session would undermine the fundamental basis of a parliamentary democracy. We are astonished and anguished by the attitude of the Governor of Rajasthan. We are therefore protesting today before all Raj Bhavans in the country to highlight the gravity of the issue and draw the people's attention to the violations of the Constitution. We sincerely hope that the Governor of Rajasthan will obey the law and only the law. He must remember that he has no other masters except the Constitution and the law. He must immediately grant the request of the Council of Ministers and summon a session of the Legislative Assembly of Rajasthan. Constitutional authorities function according to the law. There is a remedy. The Council of Ministers of the Centre, the Home Minister, the Prime Minister can send word to the Governor, please call a session. Obviously, the President of India, the Rashtrapati, has the absolute authority to tell the governor what you're doing is wrong and please call a session. Now, I can only hope that the Rashtrapati will intervene in the matter and instruct the governor to call a session. If failing constitutional authorities, and I don't want to come to any premature conclusion at this stage, if failing the constitutional authorities, then I think one has to explore legal remedies. But that is for the lawyers advising Mr. Ashok Gehlot to tell him what to do. I'm sure they are looking into the matter after the governor's latest communication, asserting that he has a discretion in the matter. Let me repeat, he has no discretion in the matter. Who did the governor? The governor should consult the Advocate General of Rajasthan. Has he consulted the Advocate General of Rajasthan? Can he place before the public any written opinion given by any competent law officer suggesting that he has a discretion to convene or not to convene? I don't think anyone acquainted with the law will give him such an advice. The law is very clear. Just look at Nabam Rebiya's case, 2016, Volume 8, Supreme Court Cases, page 1, and please see paragraphs 162 to 167 and 276. The governor has no discretion in the matter. Some institutions have failed. I don't want to get into the details, but I still believe that not all institutions will always fail. Sometime or other, they have to wake up back. There is a constitution of India. Now, I'm not advising Mr. Gehlot on the legal strategy. He has very competent, top-notch lawyers advising him, and I'm sure they will advise him on a legal strategy. I can only point out that I still believe that the President of India can intervene and instruct the governor to call a session. The law is very clear. It's in simple English. If you and I can understand, I'm sure everyone can understand. Charge is that Mr. Gehlot does not have a majority. Mr. Gehlot, in the letter to the governor, has said, my Council of Ministers has resolved to call a session of the Assembly. But he has publicly said that he will prove his majority on the floor of the House. That he does not have to say in the governor's letter to the governor. In fact, all that he has to say is the Council of Ministers wishes as resolved that the Assembly should be convened. That's the end of the matter. The governor has no business to ask him what agenda, how many days, how many hours. All that is irrelevant. See, parliamentary democracy is on the basis of functioning legislature, not a sleeping legislature, not an absent legislature. When the legislature is called to meet, it must meet. The British House of Commons meets practically throughout the year. The US Congress meets practically throughout the year, except during the holiday period. So the more the Assembly meets, everybody should be happy. That is the living symbol of a functioning parliamentary democracy, a legislative party which is meeting, legislative assembly which is meeting as often as possible. So the governor should be very happy that the legislative assembly is being called to meet. And Mr. Gehlot has made it clear he will prove his majority. If somebody wants to bring a no confidence motion, they can bring it against him. If he wants to move a confidence motion, he can move a confidence motion. If there is a bill, you can vote for, you can vote against. But let the House meet. Does one have to explain why the House should meet? The law is clear. 5 judges in 1992 declared the law that no quiet time at action is possible. No court can intervene until the speaker takes. It's in plain English language. Now, when one goes to court, one goes in the belief that a 5-judge bench's judgment of the Supreme Court which is binding on all authorities and all courts, will be followed. But then you find out to your deep regret that it is not followed. In hindsight, how can you say you should not go to court? The law was very clear from 1992. In fact, I was amused when presumably a BJP Bhakt replies to my tweet and says, "Oh, that is 1992. We are in 2020. What kind of an argument is that? The fact that that has been the law for 28 years, stood the test of 28 years and many, many situations, means that is the law. That law can only be changed or modified by another larger bench of the Supreme Court. I mean, that's the way I was trained in law school, and I have practiced law for the last, I don't know now, nearly 50 years. I can't believe that a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court, which says in clear, simple English, will not be followed by a high court. Now, today we can say by hindsight, that should not have been done, this should not have been done. But our sight is on the judgment, and we believe that the judgment was binding on everyone.
अगर आपको हमारे वीडियोस पसंद आए तो प्लीज़ लाइक करें, सब्सक्राइब करें और शेयर करें।